Hello guys, welcome back to our anime moments. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of upcoming episode of Tales of Herding Gods based on novel. So let's start. Qin Mu frowned. Pan Gongso was afraid of the shaman poison he had created himself, so he didn't dare to attack and could only retreat. However, the shaman spell he had used to pay respect to the soul when he was angry was indeed terrifying. Pan Gongso was still on 6 Directions realm, yet experts on 7 Stars realm had just died with just the paying of respect. The abilities of the 3 demon monks were very extraordinary, and they were strange beasts that had great success in their cultivation, yet that had helped them none. Golden Winged Dopeng was considered quite a well-known unusual breed in Great Ruins and had extremely strong abilities. Their corporeal bodies were tough, and by cultivating the Dharma of Little Thunderclap Monastery, their primordial spirits were stable. For someone to kill 3 Golden Winged Dopeng in a row by just paying respects, the divine art was truly enough to make Butcher take strict precautions. In the past, Pan Gongso had some tolerance, giving off the demeanor of a great scholar. However, after suffering several setbacks under Qin Mu's hands, he was shamed into anger and no longer held back. This time, he killed 3 demon monks of Little Thunderclap Monastery by paying respects, but next, he would probably lay his hands on the people beside Qin Mu. Who would be able to take his respect? However, after Pan Gongso paid his respects to these 3 people, he seemed to have suffered heavy injuries as well. It's obvious that this divine art has an extremely great drawback and can't be used recklessly. Qin Mu's brow still didn't relax. Even though the drawback was great, such a divine art was still hard to deal with, impossible to guard against. Bury these 3 monks, we can't let their corpses be exposed to the wild. The few of them buried the corpses of the 3 Golden Winged Dopengs, and Qin Mu paid his respects while sighing. Rest in peace, I shall burn Pan Gongso as an offering to you guys some other day. Let us go. Wait a minute. The dragon Qilin immediately halted, and Qin Mu shut his eyes. After a moment, he opened them and took out his brush, ink, inkstone, and paper. His vital chi burst forth and spread open the paper in midair. Stirring the ink with his brush, he painted in midair, and not long later, a picture of the devil standing on the sacrificial altar was painted by him. Qin Mu planned to put down the last stroke, but he stopped. He took out his seal to stamp on the painting and only then made the last stroke. The crux of Pan Gongso paying respect to the soul with the shaman spell should lie within this devil. Looking it up and down, Qin Mu ensured that he didn't draw it wrongly. Between the painting and calligraphy Def had taught him, painting had to pay particular attention to capturing the form, will, and grace. Qin Mu frequently went out of the village with him to collect local cultural materials and draw all kinds of stuff. Even though the devil behind Pan Gongso hadn't stayed there for a long time, Qin Mu had still captured its rough form and grace, painting the devil accurately. I don't recognize this devil, but there are all kinds of god and devil sculptures in Great Ruins. Village chief, Old Ma, and the rest are more experienced and should recognize it. Since I'm already in Great Ruins, I should just return to the village and ask them. Even if they don't recognize it, there's still Heavenly Saint Cult and Eternal Peace Empire. Among all of them, there will be someone who will recognize it. Qin Mu put away the painting and thought to himself, as long as someone recognizes this devil, there will be a possibility to break Pan Gongso's shaman spell. Otherwise, I'll just have to get rid of him without caring for consequences. Not caring for consequences meant that he would have to attack Roland's Golden Palace. But before he could even lay his hand on this sacred ground, he would have to take down the prairie by eliminating all the countries there. The difficulty of this could be well imagined. Without any alternatives, the final way out would be to incite the Emperor to launch his troops on the prairie and raise Roland's Golden Palace, since Heavenly Saint Cult alone didn't have such an ability at the moment. The dragon Qilin took a step away, and Qin Mu called the 2 white bats back to treat their injuries. When they were healed, Qin Mu sprinted into the sky with the protection of the 2 white bats to survey the terrain. After a moment, he landed and frowned slightly. He didn't see Surging River. If he saw Surging River, he could determine his location, but without it, he had a hard time to determine his precise location with just the markings on the geographical map of Great Ruins. After walking 100 miles to the east, Qin Mu once again flew into the sky to survey the terrain, comparing it with the map in his memory. He did a few more times before finally determined their location from the path of the mountains. Our location is close to West Heaven Palace, not far from West Earth. Qin Mu determined his direction and let out a sigh of relief. Landing on the ground, he told the dragon Qilin the route. After another 100 miles east, Qin Mu reckoned they were close to the location where West Heaven Palace was marked on the geographical map of Great Ruins. Surveying his surroundings, he suddenly saw that the road was becoming more and more precipitous. A huge piece of land was stabbed diagonally in Great Ruins and was like a huge circular plate. It was much higher than the mountains surrounding it and seemed to have fallen from outer space. The dragon Qilin stopped in his footsteps, and Qin Mu looked at this huge piece of land. He saw that it was covered in dense vegetation and that there was a large ruin among the green plants. Where some parts of the land were cracked, the shine of metal could be seen. Deep underground, something made out of metal was buried. There were also some majestic god statues, some standing upright while some were collapsed, on the ground. Qin Mu's group spent quite some time walking around this land, quite stunned. In front of them was a basin with scattered slabs of land. Some were stabbed into the ground, some were overturned, showing off a mountain's bottom, while some had split into a few pieces. There were also some slabs that had a complete ruin of a city. There were strange beasts moving inside them, the strong ones roaring in heart-stopping voices from time to time, threatening the life forms from other territories when they got near. Where the slabs of land had broken off, a long construction made out of metal was revealed. There looked to be pipes of different heights all around there. When wind blew across the basin, these metal constructions would hum in a tune which was actually melodious. How did such a magnificent civilization fall into such a state? After looking into the distance for a time, Qin Mu retracted his gaze. This should be a safe place that darkness couldn't invade, so there was an extremely large number of strange beasts in the surroundings. Qin Mu's group had to be extremely careful while passing through a place like this. If they took a detour, they would probably require a day to go around, so they could only continue forward. Qin Mu jumped down from the dragon Qilin's back and led the way personally. He had lived in Great Ruins ever since he was young and so knew the habits of the strange beasts well. If he let the dragon Qilin or the two white bats lead the way, they would definitely cause some trouble. He entered deep into the basin, and Qin Mu suddenly saw the ruts of a carriage. The ruts had to have been left behind by that carriage of West Earth's true heaven palace. There were also some messy footsteps which should have been left behind by the divine arts practitioners giving chase. They had obviously barged into this place in a hurry, but looking from their tracks, these people had to know the rules of Great Ruins well since they didn't take the wrong path. However, the divine arts of West Earth's true heaven palace were pretty unusual as their scale and activity were all very large in scope. If they were to make their moves here, it would be easy for them to anger the territorial strange beasts. If we take the same path as them, we might get implicated. Qin Mu wanted to find another path, yet what could he do when this was the only safe path across this basin? If he was to take a detour, he would have to go through a huge pool. He looked toward that huge pool, and the water in it suddenly churned. A huge crocodile man rose up and stood on the water's surface. With smoke spewing out from his nose, he sharpened his already razor-sharp claws. This territorial strange beast wasn't good to provoke, so if Qin Mu took a detour through there, he would be seeking death. On the other side were the ruins of a city. It had as many majestic shrines as there was hair on a cow, and numerous red-crowned and black-necked cranes were flying around it. They danced in the sky and looked very peaceful. However, in the city, there were two huge, male and female, cranes practicing their sword moves. As their wings vibrated, countless sword lights filled the sky and lined up into a circle. From the movement speed of those sword lights, Qin Mu felt that these two crane leaders were even more dangerous than the crocodile leader. There's only this path. Qin Mu let out a shaky breath and muttered under his breath, "We cannot interfere with the family matters of West Earth's true heaven palace. I'm not someone who likes fighting and poking my nose into other people's business. We will just walk around them." The center of the basin was very bustling, with 4 rhinoceroses that had thick bone armor walking around. Their bodies were snow white, without a speck of impurity. Their little eyes glanced at Qin Mu and the dragon Qilin behind him in alert, as well as the white bats that were flying to and fro and hanging themselves on the trees continuously. One of the female rhinoceroses spoke up in a human language. This huge dog is so fat that it had become a pig, yet it is actually still able to walk. The rhinoceroses in the lead had an ashen face and immediately rolled on the ground, transforming into a giant with the head of a rhinoceros and a human body. Underneath his bone armor was bulging muscles, and he put his front hooves forward while saying to Qin Mu, "Dao friend, my old wife likes to spout nonsense, please don't take it to heart." Qin Mu smiled. "No worries. Fatty Dragon is indeed a little fat." The rhinoceros leader let out a sigh of relief and brought the 3 female rhinoceros to leave immediately while grumbling, "Can't you see it? These fellows are all ruthless characters, every one of them is fiendish, especially that human and the 2 white bats, having so many souls of the dead circling around them." Qin Mu was astonished, and the dragon Qilin said, "People say that white rhinoceroses are psychic, that they are able to see the netherworld as well as the souls of the dead. It's truly remarkable. However, they are still wrong in their judgment. I'm not a huge dog nor am I fat, I'm sturdy." The sound of divine arts and spirit weapons clashing against each other came from up ahead. It sounded very lively over there. Qin Mu called the 2 white bats over and carefully walked forward. They didn't walk far before a battlefield opened up in front of their eyes. The strong practitioners of True Heaven Palace were surrounding the carriage, all of their bodies already covered in wounds. When those divine arts practitioners of True Heaven Palace saw their arrival, they suddenly stopped attacking. Instead, they turned their heads to look at them without moving. "Dao friend." A youth came out from the crowd and greeted Qin Mu. "Family matters." Qin Mu returned the greeting. "I'm only just passing by." The youth revealed a smile and waved his hand. "Open a path and let them pass." Qin Mu smiled and nodded to both sides to show his intention before bringing the dragon Qilin and the 2 white bats over. In front of them, they saw that the carriage was already shattered in pieces, the wheels and roof destroyed. One of the plum-blossom deer sat beside the broken carriage while the other was in its true form. This should be because it was too injured and could no longer keep up its human shape. The mother and daughter that the 2 deers were protecting had come out from the carriage. The woman was covered in blood and gasping for breath as she protected the child behind her. "Righteous person." The man that had transformed from the buck suddenly stretched out his hand and grabbed the corner of Qin Mu's shirt. He raised his head with difficulty, hanging onto the last of his breath. "Righteous person, could you please?" Qin Mu pulled his shirt free and broke away from his grasp to continue walking forward. He passed by the doe and was slightly stunned. He saw that she was already dead, without any more breath left. Qin Mu pulled his gaze back and continued to walk forward. Suddenly, the woman who was referred to as Naikue grabbed his hand and looked at him hopefully while pleading in a hoarse voice, "Take my child, just let her live." Qin Mu paused, and the youth from True Heaven Palace behind him shouted, "Dao friends, these are the family matters of our True Heaven Palace." Qin Mu broke free from the woman's grasp and continued to walk forward. He smiled at the divine arts practitioners of True Heaven Palace on both sides and led the dragon Qilin and the 2 white bats out of the battlefield. The dragon Qilin caught up to Qin Mu in a few steps and turned his head to look at his face. He hesitated before saying, "Cult Master." Qin Mu was expressionless as he said, "It's other people's family matters, so we shouldn't interfere." "It's good not to interfere. Patriarch said that you like to create trouble, but it looks like you have grown up." Qin Mu stared blankly ahead. "Grown up? This is growing up. You understand how to weigh the pros and cons, so you have naturally grown up. You have become rational," the dragon Qilin explained. "You were very irrational in the past, fighting here and there, not fearing to offend anyone. During those few months, Patriarch had to clean up a lot of your messes." Qin Mu fell silent as shouts came behind him. "So this is growing up? I don't want to grow up then." Qin Mu burst into laughter and continued walking forward. Small swords came flying out silently from his Daotai sack and stabbed in his surroundings. More and more flying swords landed on the ground and laid a sword formation. He continued walking forward, and the 8,000 swords continued to enter the ground in front of him. Sword-treading mountains and rivers, the swords actually formed the shape of mountains and rivers by stabbing themselves into the ground. With a ding, the final sword landed. Qin Mu stopped and pressed his hand down. The 8,000 swords went underground in unison, and he suddenly covered himself with his clothing, vanishing without a trace. Your father, am not willing to become an adult like this. Right and wrong. Naikue, so what if you escape to great ruins? The youth had his hands behind his back and looked at the other divine arts practitioners of True Heaven Palace attacking the woman protecting the little girl. With a calm expression, he said, "You guys have already lost, and True Heaven Palace now belongs to the you. Don't blame me for being heartless. There's a good saying in Middle-earth, if the roots are not removed during weeding, the weeds will grow back up when the winds of spring begin to blow. True Heaven Palace no longer belongs to your Xiong family." Their current place was considered to be the remains of Great Ruins West Heaven Palace, so the practitioners of True Heaven Palace had to be careful in executing their divine arts here. What they cultivated was the idea that all things had souls and spirits. Mountains had mountain spirits, water had water spirits, grass, trees, and wild beasts had their own spirits as well, with no one being an exception. There was nothing that couldn't become a divine art. Because of that, they naturally had sharp senses in regards to nature, and in the remains of Great Ruins West Heaven Temple, they could feel a danger. Everything here contained immense power, as if there were ancient gods lying asleep somewhere below. Their divine arts could awaken all things in the world to fight for them, but if they awakened the gods in this land, they would only bring great danger upon themselves. The power of West Heaven Palace wasn't a power they could control. Therefore, they had to be careful not to stir up this imposing but for the time being, lying dormant power. Luckily, they had all refined their own spirit weapons. They were different from the spirit weapons of Eternal Peace Empire's divine arts practitioners, however. Most of them were in the shapes of grasses, trees, mountains, flowing water, and white clouds. There were also strange beasts that had been refined into spirit weapons by them, so after they activated their vital chi, the bodies of the tiny strange beasts would swell up by 10,000 times and swallow living humans, which was very unusual. Thus, even if these people couldn't use their divine arts, they could easily get rid of the couple escapees. With one of the plum blossom deers dead and the other one heavily injured, the woman would have to protect her child by herself. She wouldn't be able to move and avoid their attacks, only able to stand there and hold on against their beating. The woman vomited blood and collapsed on the ground, yet she soon crawled upward to her feet to continue protecting the little girl. Traitor! The man flew up and revealed his true form, transforming into a huge buck to face the attacks from the crowd while shouting sternly, "Palace Master had treated you guys well, yet you guys took the chance when Palace Master passed away to rebel. Where's your conscience? Why are you still being so ruthless?" Bang, bang, bang. In an instant, countless attacks landed on his body, and he was killed up in the sky. Before he died, though, he tried his best to swing his huge antlers out to stab at the youth. The abilities of the two deers were extremely brilliant, not in any way inferior to those of the dragon Qin. It was only a pity that there were too many people on the other side and they could only meet with such a miserable end. Over a dozen divine arts practitioners rose into the sky and grabbed onto the branches of the antlers. The dozen or so people landed on the ground, yet they still couldn't stop the force from the swing of the antlers and were pushed back. The soil and rocks under their feet overturned, and the antlers continued to crash towards their target. The youth was unmoved and sneered, "Xiong family has dominated True Heaven Palace for so many years that it should be time to give up the position of the Palace Master. Blood must be seen when killing a person and weeds must be uprooted. If your Xiong family isn't extinguished, our Yu family will have to worry about you guys making a comeback." In front of him, a puppet-sized strange beast suddenly swelled up and gave a world-shaking roar as it beat its chest with both of its hands. It grabbed the antlers that were crashing over with both of its hand, and the antlers came to a stop. Ba thump. The corpse of the buck landed beside the doe. The youth laughed and said, "Kill Naikue and the little princess so we can go back and finish our mission." The divine arts practitioners of True Heaven Palace walked up, and their spirit weapons flew into the air. The woman gave them a dark look and turned to hug the little girl in her arms while saying in a gentle voice, "Little darling, it's going to be fast. Mom, can we meet Grandpa and Grandma?" The woman's heart trembled. "We can. What about Dad?" The little girl's eyes were sparkling as she asked. The woman shed tears when she said, "We will meet him." The little girl calmly consoled the young married woman, "Mom, I'm not scared, so you don't cry either. I miss Grandpa and Grandma. Before Dad died, he looked so scary, covered in blood, he made me cry from shock, but I think he will be smiling when we see him later." Whoosh! The spirit weapons transformed into spirit trees and strange beasts in the sky, then pounced at them. But just as they were about to land on them, a ray of light flashed by and Qin Mu appeared in front of the mother and daughter. When he spread out his arms, the embroidered gown on his body automatically flew out in front of him. The youth gave a smack with his palm on the embroidered gown, and Qin Mu's arm swirled. The embroidered gown rotated, becoming larger and larger, transforming into a gown that had a radius of over 30 yards. The spirit weapons of True Heaven Palace crashed into this embroidered gown and got wrapped up, after which they vanished along with the gown. Afterward, 300 yards away from them, countless sword lights shone as 8,000 swords moved in unison, slashing the spirit weapons and the embroidered gown into pieces. The divine arts practitioners of True Heaven Palace were astonished as they lost their connection to their spirit weapons. Among them, there was no lack of strong practitioners on Celestial Being Realm whose spirit weapons were extremely powerful. Yet even these were sliced into pieces. Everyone wanted to move forward to attack, but the youth hurriedly stopped them and probed, "Dao friend, these are the family matters of our True Heaven Palace." Qin Mu felt his heart in pain as he thought about his embroidered gown. It had been bribed by him from Incense Master Chu and Venomous Insect Hall Master in Secret Waters Pass. Ever since it was tailored, it had saved Qin Mu from harm several times. Furthermore, his teleportation formation markings were imprinted on that embroidered gown. Now that it had been destroyed along with the spirit weapons of True Heaven Palace's strong practitioners by his sword-treading mountains and rivers, how could his heart not be pained? "I should have known there would be nothing good from doing good, what a great loss." Qin Mu squeezed out a smile. "How do I address this little brother? You Buchuan of True Heaven Palace's you family." The young master was full of smiles, making people feel like they were bathing in the spring wind. He said, "Dao friend must have felt pity when seeing an orphan with a widowed mother, therefore, you wanted to save them. However, you don't know that this mother and daughter have done much evil, killing countless people in their daily lives. Our West Earth's True Heaven Palace place righteousness before family, so I was ordered to lead everyone to come and annihilate them." Qin Mu nodded solemnly. "So I see. I'm the one being reckless, may brother you pardon me." That youth Yu Buchuan smiled. "One who does not know is not guilty. May senior brother please give us face and let us finish this difficult mission. To kill these two rebels, we have already lost countless brothers." Qin Mu put on a righteous face and said, "Your matters are of course important, but I can't just take your word for it. I still need to ask them if they are like what you have said." Yu Buchuan smiled with a pleasant look on his face. "Dao friend, I've already given you a ladder to step down, so don't fail to appreciate my kindness." Qin Mu also smiled with a pleasant expression. Heavenly Devil Cult Master doesn't need anyone to give him a ladder to step down. If it's truly like what you have said, I'll just turn and leave, and you guys can continue to deal with your traitors. If no need for that. Yu Buchuan raised his hand and instructed those to his left and his right, kill him and finish the mission. Understood. Most of the Qi refiners acknowledged the command in unison and leaped towards Qin Mu. He laughed loudly and turned around to run after picking up the mother and daughter. One of the strong practitioners of Celestial Being Realm shouted out angrily, "Can you even run?" A towering tree appeared behind him, its roots like coiling green dragons. This was his primordial spirit. The cultivation method of West Earth's True Heaven Palace was also different from that of Eternal Peace Empire. The primordial spirits of Eternal Peace Empire's strong practitioners were usually split into Green Dragon, White Tiger, Vermilion Bird, and Black Tortoise. Once someone cultivated to Celestial Being Realm, their primordial spirit would appear behind them and usually be one of the 4 great spirit bodies after God transformation, which was similar to the 4 kinds of stone statues in disabled elderly village. Even if there was a difference, it wouldn't be a huge one, since they all belonged to the 4 major types. The primordial spirits of True Heaven Palace's strong practitioners were peculiar. Even though that strong practitioner on Celestial Being Realm belonged to the Green Dragon bloodline, his primordial spirit looked like a tree, which was rarely seen. The roots and branches of the huge tree flailed like green dragons dancing in the sky, spreading towards Qin Mu's back. Their speed was extremely fast, and rays of green lights flashed across the sky. Even though Qin Mu was carrying 2 people, his movements were extremely fast. Like flickering lights and passing shadows, his speed surpassed the speed of sound and exploded with a thunderclap. Cripple's heaven-pilfering divine legs was considered to be the #1 movement skill in the whole world, but Qin Mu was still on 6 Directions realm and couldn't execute it to Cripple's standard. Furthermore, the abilities of the strong practitioners on Celestial Being Realm were simply too strong. The roots caught up to Qin Mu in a blink of an eye and stabbed towards the back of his heart. Yet at that moment, sword lights burst forth once again in the surroundings, and the 8,000 swords rose up like a storm again, instantly unscrolling a picture of mountains and rivers behind Qin Mu. Endless sounds of collision rang out as the swords slashed at the roots and branches that were trying to pass through. The power of sword picture was extraordinary, and in addition to that, Qin Mu's swords were all made from the best materials. Because of that, there were quite some roots and branches of the divine tree primordial spirit that got chopped off. However, Celestial Being Realm was still Celestial Being Realm. The divine tree primordial spirit crashed over with a world-shaking rumble. Sword picture instantly crumbled, and the 8,000 swords flew off in all directions. Fatty dragon! Qin Mu shouted out loudly. The dragon Qilin came sprinting over from the front, but even though his speed was very fast, his speech was very slow. Cult Master, you've created trouble again. The body of the dragon Qilin became larger and larger until it collided with the divine tree primordial spirit. True fire blazed around his body, and the flames with extremely high temperature burned down the divine tree primordial spirit. The Celestial Being Realm's strong practitioner immediately called back his primordial spirit, and a burly man wearing a lined jacket rushed forth with heavy footsteps. Behind him, a rock giant appeared, which was his mountain god primordial spirit that had boundless strength. With a punch, he sent the dragon Qilin flying. The dragon Qilin tumbled back in midair. Because he was too fat, he couldn't help when he couldn't control the fire clouds, thus he immediately pulled himself into a ball and shouted out, "Fu brothers!" The 2 white bats flapped their wings to fly over and let out silent sound waves from their mouths. Those sound waves turned the pursuers into a complete mess. The dragon Qilin crashed onto the ground and pulled out his head before shaking it. He roared in anger, "I had called you guys to catch me." The 2 white bats flew around nimbly to avoid the attacks from below, until they grabbed 2 guys and went to hang upside down on a tree, hugging their victims to drink their blood. Yet the tree ended up transforming as it was the primordial spirit of another strong practitioner, binding the 2 white bats securely. Qin Mu took out a huge white bone hammer and shook it gently. In an instant, countless skulls came out from the eyes, ears, mouth, and nose of the white skull, filling the entire sky. The skulls squeaked weirdly and pounced forth, shuttling among the crowd and biting whoever they found before tunneling into their bodies. The dragon Qilin rushed over again and spewed out blazing true fire towards the green tree primordial spirit, saving the 2 white bats. Yu Buchuan saw the situation and immediately shouted out, "Retreat! We can't execute our skills here, we'll have to fight them outside." The strong practitioners of True Heaven Palace quickly fell back and vanished, leaving behind a mess. Qin Mu frowned slightly. This youth called Yu Buchuan was a ruthless character, and his decisions were firm, without any hesitation. Such an outstanding youth was rarely seen in the current times. A very outstanding youth. Qin Mu rather admired him as he placed the mother and daughter down. The dragon Qilin walked over and grumbled, "Cult Master, haven't you caused trouble? Now that we antagonized these people, if they decide to fight with us outside the basin, they can just transform any mountain into a mountain giant and crush us to death. This is Great Ruins, not West Earth, Qin Mu said while shaking his head. To fight with me in my territory? They won't even know how they died. Besides, the bond between the mother and the daughter has moved me. If I didn't act straightforwardly, wouldn't it be considered heresy? The dragon Qilin stared at him blankly. To act straightforwardly, to be free from nature, this was a good way to summarize the great educational heavenly devil scriptures. Furthermore, the next sentence was, that's the meaning of path. This was the path. This then is Heavenly Saint Cult Master, the dragon Qilin sighed ruefully in his heart. He didn't understand Qin Mu's actions, but every move and action he took was according to the teachings of Heavenly Saint Cult. To act straightforwardly, to be free from nature, that's the meaning of path. Qin Mu had already achieved this step and started to walk on his own path. No wonder the young patriarch had chosen him as the next cult master and no one else. It was also no wonder that the whole master and elders of Heavenly Devil Cult were willing to accept him. Qin Mu checked the injuries of the young woman and asked, "This lady, what exactly is your background? Why are the people of West Earth's true heaven palace after your lives?" The young woman was holding onto her last breath when she raised her head up. "I'm the Nai Kuei of True Heaven Palace." Qin Mu turned around and asked the dragon Qilin, "What's the meaning of Nai Kuei?" Nai Kuei means princess mother. The women are the ones in charge of the family in West Earth's True Heaven Palace, having visiting marriage with the men. At night there would be a banquet, and after the songs and dances, if both sides take a liking to each other, they will go to the woman's house to consummate, the dragon Qilin explained. The next morning, the man must leave. This would happen a few more times, the man and woman spending a few nights together until the woman gets pregnant, giving birth and raising the child. The child would then usually know their mother but not their father. Patriarch had gone for a visiting marriage there before, that old degenerate. Qin Mu gave him a stare. "Don't talk bad about Patriarch. Say the important stuff." The young Patriarch had an extremely high image in his heart. Even though he looked like a young man that was about the same age as him, he was a flawless person to Qin Mu and couldn't be tainted. Patriarch was a casual and dissolute old degenerate before, wearing the outfits of different tribes to flirt everywhere in West Earth. And he didn't even have to take responsibility. That old degenerate was so happy that his buttocks jolted here and there. The dragon Qilin then saw that Qin Mu wasn't pleased and immediately changed the topic. The mistress of True Heaven Palace also needs to go through visiting marriage. If the palace master of True Heaven Palace is pregnant or has a child, if the child is a female, she will be the princess and the next successor. If it is a male, the child will be let out of the palace. The True Heaven Palace master that has a child will be called Princess Mother or Nai Kuei in the language of West Earth. The abilities of Nai Kuei are usually extremely strong. After all, the technique they cultivate is all things have spirit, all things have soul. Women are usually stronger than men in the attainments of this field. Qin Mu squatted down and took out silver needles to stab into the woman's body. He asked curiously, "Since you're True Heaven Palace master, the mistress of True Heaven Palace, how did you land into such a state? Aren't you an expert on Divine Bridge Realm?" He then took out some spirit herbs and applied medicine according to the symptoms, refining spirit pills to cure her injuries. "Don't waste your efforts." The woman shook her head. "My injuries are already incurable. If my cultivation was still with me, I wouldn't have landed in this state. I was poisoned by Mu Inshue, the most well-known poison maker. The poison she used on me is called coiling silk." The dragon Qilin chuckled. "Don't worry, if Cult Master doesn't want you to die, not even Earth Count can take your soul away." Qin Mu's hand techniques changed as he skillfully refined the spirit pills while shaking his head. "Don't brag, be a little more humble. My medical expertise isn't the number 1 in the world, I'm only number 2. As for poison, at most number 3 in the world. Little Poison King, that guy, is still stronger than me by a little." The young woman felt herself become more comfortable under Qin Mu's treatment and was bewildered. She said, "My mother was the palace master. After she passed away, True Heaven Palace elected me as the successor. My cultivation realm was somewhat okay, so I could succeed with difficulty. However, an unforeseen event happened at the succession ceremony. I was poisoned by Mu Xue and my cultivation was reduced to nothing. The same happened to everyone in our Xiong family. Yu family then took this chance to eradicate my Xiong family. I could only bring my daughter away. Qin Mu refined the medicinal energy while sighing ruefully. There's something wrong with how your true heaven palace manages things. The young woman was slightly angered and asked, what is wrong with the way we manage things? Qin Mu fused the medicinal energy and gathered it into a pill. There are 3 big sacred grounds in eternal peace: Great Thunderclap Monastery, Tao Sect, and my Heavenly Saint cult. I'm the cult master, and when I succeeded as such, I was only on 5 elements realm, yet no one rebelled against me. The new Tao master Lin Xian of Tao Sect has a cultivation realm similar to mine, yet no one in Tao Sect had rebelled and dethroned him. When old Rulai of Great Thunderclap Monastery left, the seat of Rulai is empty, but everyone is still living together in harmony, no one fighting one another to snatch the seat of Rulai. My Heavenly Saint cult is sometimes called Heavenly Devil cult in eternal peace, but even if we are fiendish, our inheritance is still in order. Comparing that to your true heaven palace, you guys are inferior. That's why I said that there's something wrong with the way you guys manage things. The young woman stared at him blankly. She wanted to retort, but she really couldn't find a way to do it. Qin Mu pinched open her mouth and fed her a spirit pill. His 2 fingers slid down her throat, and the vital qi on his fingertips brought the spirit pill all the way to her abdomen. With a few flicks, he catalyzed the medicinal energy of the spirit pill. His sleeves fluttered, and the young woman floated upward. As his 10 fingers danced around, he tapped countless times on her body, refining all the medicinal energy inside her body. When he stopped, the young woman landed on the ground. She staggered, but her internal injuries were already healing rapidly. Qin Mu turned around to look at the little girl, who was adorable. She looked 4 to 5 years old and had 2 small braids. On her body were numerous gold, silver, and jade accessories, and they were all pretty good spirit weapons. He examined her and saw that she had only suffered some superficial wounds. She wasn't badly wounded and just need to apply some dragon saliva. Little sister, what's your name? Qin Mu asked. The little girl blinked her shiny black eyes and said in a loud and clear voice, Xiong Chia. My mom is called Xiong Xiu. Qin Mu smiled. Your mom is true heaven palace's master, so I can't call her by her name, I can only call her palace master. On the other hand, I can call you Chia. My name is Qin Mu. The young woman Xiong Xiu immediately said, Greet Uncle Qin. Qin Mu's expression instantly blackened, and he said to Xiong Xiu, I'm only 15 years old, calling me big brother is fine. Xiong Xiu said with a troubled expression, Big brother Qin. Qin Mu immediately said, I said to let Chia call me big brother, not you. Xiong Xiu's face immediately turned beet red. Qin Mu laughed out loud and made her stretch out her hand. He pricked her finger and took a drop of blood. Once he spread his hands apart, the drop of blood instantly swelled up by 10,000 times and transformed into a huge blood cell. For formation markings appeared in Qin Mu's pupils and transformed into cyan heaven's eyes. After examining the cell in detail, he said, so it's a poison that affects the vital qi, but doesn't do much damage to the body. Palace Master, pardon me, I'm going to enter your body and check your divine treasures. Xiong Xiu wanted to say something, but before she could, Qin Mu transformed into a black shadow and entered the heart of her brows. Xiong Xiu instantly felt the heart of her brows swell up, then the area of her heart, as if there was a tiny human tunneling to and fro in her body. Qin Mu checked all the way from spirit embryo divine treasure to celestial being divine treasure. When he came to life and death divine treasure, he couldn't help being astonished. It was actually open. Could she be a great expert on life and death realm? He transformed into a black shadow and entered Xiong Xiu's divine bridge divine treasure, and his heart trembled violently. The divine bridge divine treasure of this woman was actually open. I saved a female expert on the cult master level, and she actually called me big brother. Qin Mu became slightly giddy, but he composed himself before leaving Xiong Xiu's body. It was no wonder that she could become the palace master of a big sacred ground when she was in existence on divine bridge realm. Xiong Xiu felt the abnormal feeling in her body vanish and immediately asked, Cult Master Qin, the poison in my body. The poison has already entered your divine treasures through the circulation of your vital qi, tainting your divine treasures. Qin Mu calculated for a moment, then said, if you had immediately closed off your divine treasures, the poison wouldn't have gone in so deeply and would be easy to remove. But now that it has entered the divine treasures, there will be some difficulty in refining it away. Xiong Xiu looked grey. Mu Yingxia's coiling silk's poison is unrivaled in the world. The longer I drag it out, the more exhausted will my vital qi become and my cultivation will drop even lower. Not long after that, I'm afraid I will become useless. Unrivaled in the world? Qin Mu smiled and said, I only dare to call myself number 3 in the world in regards to poison, so how could she dare to call herself number 1? Don't worry, I can help you suppress the toxicity so this poison won't continue to exhaust your cultivation. However, I don't have enough spirit herbs, so I will need to gather some. A thread of hope rose up in Xiong Xiu's heart. She struggled to get up while holding her daughter's hand. Cult Master Qin, thank you very much. What I said yesterday was speaking and doing anything in a crisis, so I purposely tried to agitate Cult Master Qin. Qin Mu waved his hand, not minding it. He smiled. Righteous person? I'm not one. Truth be told, my reputation isn't good in the eyes of the righteous path in Eternal Peace Empire. If you told them that Cult Master Qin of Heavenly Saint Cult is a righteous person, they would laugh their heads off. He picked Xiong Xiu up and placed her on the dragon Chilin's back. Let's go. Xiong Xiu immediately said, you Buchuan and the rest. This is Great Ruins and not West Earth, Qin Mu said leisurely. Coming to Great Ruins means coming to my home. There, they can forget about playing any tricks. Xiong Xiu felt worried but could only follow after him. When she thought of it, it was quite weird that during the time she had been talking to him, her injuries had become much better and her footsteps also gradually felt lighter. When they walked out of the basin, her injuries had already healed. Qin Mu in the meantime looked around for spirit herbs. Whenever he saw some, he would go to pluck them. On the way out of the basin, he actually gathered hundreds of spirit herbs. As he plucked them, he refined them as well. Xiong Xiu was bewildered at the sight of it. Qin Mu had refined dozens of herbs, but he had stuffed all of them into his Daotai sack, so she didn't know what medicine he had refined. They came to a hill zone, and Qin Mu frowned slightly. There were verdant hills and limpid water, creating a pleasant scenery. There was actually no traces of strange beasts nor even little birds. Something's wrong. At this moment, they heard songs coming from ahead of them. The voices of the singers were charming and gentle, tugging at the heartstrings. Qin Mu threw a glance at the 2 white bats, and they immediately flew forward, toward the place from which the voices came. After a moment, the white bats flew back and said, there's a lake ahead of you, and there are many naked girls bathing there. This video will end here.